everyone, Nicole Russo and Ashley Mailloux welcoming you to this week's Oaks Countdown. And with this week's running of the Ashland Stakes, which we'll discuss more in depth in a moment, all of the points races toward the Oaks are now in the books. Here are the final point standings that determine preference toward the Oaks, which is limited to 14 starters, up to 4 also eligibles allowed to be listed on the program. What strikes me kind of looking at this leaderboard and how the season is shaken out, Ashley, is if this is a race where you think you can take a stand against Good Cheer, who we expect to be favored, there are a lot of very consistent fillies toward the top of this list who I think are going to be good value come race day. Lacara, Quiet Side, even the likes of Tenma or Take Charge Milady or 5G.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out because we know that the starting gate is limited to 14, but we know that there's still several weeks, Nicole. Things can change. Horses may just not be progressing. They may have minor setbacks. They don't make the starting gate. So even if you're in 15, 16, 17 right now, there's still a chance that you could get into the starting gate. Now, you mentioned if you're taking a stance against Good Cheer, I think it's wide open from there. I think if you can look at other fillies in here and look at their resumes, Quiet Side, how good she has gotten, especially in her last couple. Lacara's most recent performance. I know we'll talk a little bit later. Another consistent type, and even 5G, a filly who I think is getting into form and rounding into shape. Take Charge Milady, Simply Joking. I think to me, the top 11, 12 in here, they all are pretty live if you can look past who will likely be the favorite, Good Cheer.
And we'll certainly be discussing Good Cheer more in the coming weeks as we get into those crucial kind of final details in the training of all the Oaks fillies. But for now, let's talk about the Ashland, which was the last prep as it moved by 3 days. And a plan worked out to perfection for Lacara's connections. We've discussed that she wasn't fully cranked up last time in the Devona Dale. They were going in that race, which was a little short for her to get ideal spacing into the Ashland and then into the Kentucky Oaks. And she was much sharper on Monday for a front running win. And what I think I like most about this filly is her consistency. She won the first points race toward the Oaks back in September, has now won the last points race toward the Oaks in April, and she's earned points in 5 different races along the way.
I think it's ridiculous that she went off at 9-1 in the Ashland in terms of her resume. Maybe people wanted to go against her based on the Gulfstream race, but Mark Casse was very vocal from entering into the race at Gulfstream Park that, this was just due to timing. They were trying to space things correctly and try to have the right number of weeks going into the Kentucky Oaks, going into the Ashland. So they had to come back a little bit quicker. And it's not like he said that afterwards. He said that before, Nicole. So I think obviously very smart move by him and the connections to do that. It worked out well. She was a gift at that price. And look at her race at Tampa. I mean, if she can get sort of forwardly placed and be forward from the gate and do things easy, she still has a ton left in reserve to get the job done. We've seen that a couple of times now, and very curious to see in the Kentucky Oaks how she'll be played in there. Again, I think everyone gravitates towards Good Cheer, or in the Ashland, everyone gravitated towards Mahima, who now I think there has to be question marks around Mahima based on her last 2. Not that they aren't good races, but they're not excellent races. And I feel like some other fillies have now been able to shine and have beaten her in those races.
Yeah, and trainer Brad Cox told me immediately after the Ashland that the Oaks is now a question mark. She is qualified on points, that they're going to sit down and see how she trains and kind of huddle up with the ownership. So there's one example of how the field could continue to change, even though the points leaderboard is set. Continuing to look at the top 3 from the Ashland, Take Charge Milady made a very good rail run for second, and I think a lot to be encouraged about there. First of all, I think she needed the race, having perhaps not gotten much out of the Honeybee, where she was well back with a troubled trip. And also, Brian Hernandez said he kind of had to wait a little bit to make his move on the far turn, and the winner got a little bit of a jump on him. Now, I don't think anybody was going to catch Lacara necessarily on Monday, but I think a lot to be encouraged of by Take Charge Milady's effort. And again, we talk a lot about you're looking for the fillies that are progressing, that still have more in them for the Oaks.
And we've both been really vocal that we've been a fan of hers, and she was entered in another spot, right, and had a scratch due to a minor foot issue. Had a good work going into the Ashland, and then was able to fire a big performance. And to me, the the fillies that were closing in there, she was by far the most impressive the way that she was able to do it. And I'm still able to forgive her for the Honeybee. She just is a filly that I don't think she wants to be very far back. She can be, but I think all chances for her were sort of lost at the start. And as we mentioned, she did have a little bit of an issue and a setback after that. So I think in terms of the Ashland, the top two certainly caught my eye. I think as we kind of look at those preparations for the Kentucky Oaks, very curious to see how they'll both be played. The prices that have been on Lacara in terms of in the Ashland or even in the Suncoast, she's offered value. I wonder if Mahima scratches and you just, look at the others in there. What sort of value will she offer? The same with Kenny's filly. It's going to be very interesting to see how it shakes up. And I think there might be some horses that you might get at better prices than you typically would if it was just another race. But because it's the Kentucky Oaks, because there's a lot of attention on Good Cheer, you might get better value.
Well, as we said, just because all the preps are done doesn't mean the field is done shaping up. We're going to be watching how everybody trains closely in the next 3 weeks. Some of the fillies in the top 14, as we said, not currently locked into start. And additionally, late nominations for the Oaks do close today, April 9th. Anna's Promise, the Gulfstream Oaks runner-up, already a late nominee and an intended runner if she can get in. And we'll see if anybody else kind of jumps into the fray here if they've been encouraged by performances to this point.
Yeah, you have to sort of take a swing, right? Obviously, that's not a cheap decision to make, Nicole. It's a hefty decision, but it obviously can pay off. So be curious to see how that shakes up. I'll certainly be looking at how it plays out later today once that information becomes public. But the Kentucky Oaks, I feel like it's the Friday. It doesn't have the name as the Kentucky Derby, but to me, in terms of the quality and how wide open this event is, I think this is going to be one of the better Oaks that we've seen in recent years.
Absolutely. I think this is a very deep lineup, and we'll be back with the latest developments next week and to discuss how some of these horses are training and more as we tick ever closer to the first Friday in May.